You see, something is going to happen. Something wonderful.
My God, it's full of stars.
Welcome to the Occult Rejects. This series finally is happening, and I couldn't be happier to do it, and especially that I'm doing it with, I got the mad scientist, Lisa, and I got JJ Vance, and I got the true crime occultist herself, BD Salerno. I had to get these three on here because I didn't think the topic would get the justice it deserves. This has been a pretty big topic probably for like, I don't know, the last 10 years, maybe even longer actually. And I do think there's something behind it. I have said multiple times, and I think all of us here will probably agree with me as well, that there's definitely something behind this, but I am not of the belief that it's like one group. I do think it's just like splinter groups or people who understand ways of getting rid of dead bodies, and maybe are occultists as well. So the whole occult aspect, I thought, helped fit the Occult Rejects as well, besides just trying to, look into agencies and stuff and seeing what's really going on. This will probably end up being, I would assume, probably the 2 to 3. I mean, I don't think 4, but who knows? But I'm thinking probably 3-part series. We will be going chronologically in order with the deaths, or the victims that we cover. And we had Lisa, who has been looking into Austin, Texas, the Lady Bird Lake area. And probably maybe just the last 8 months, there's been a few accounts or things that have covered it, but it's really like kind of, in my opinion, really flying under the radar with the amount of bodies and the amount of time that has been over there. So I was really interested in covering that, especially once I started doing a little digging myself. And then I thought, why not ask the man himself, who I think has some of the best coverage on Smiley Face Killers, to have JJ jump on. And then again, with me under the belief that there might be some occultism here, I figured who better to ask on than BD Salerno to cover the occult aspect of these dates. So hopefully this should be a very, very interesting series. I'm going to come at it from multiple different angles. We'll have JJ, obviously, he's already a great researcher and connecting dots and just, covering weird connections. Lisa will have, obviously her scientific, aspect to it, and she'll be able to talk about MEs and stuff that maybe other people were not privy to understanding, or just, didn't even think of covering. So hopefully this series should be maybe a little bit different than other things out there. And I don't know. So with all that said, I'm done. Lisa, thank you very much for coming on. JJ, again. Actually, Lisa, I really didn't mean to skip you. I know you don't have much to plug, but she's on Twitter or Instagram. Real quick, Lisa Soliz or Soliz Lisa. Either one of those, you'll find her somewhere. And then JJ Vance, real quick before we get into it, do you want to just plug your show that you have going on yourself?
Appreciate the invite, Nick and Lisa. Looking forward to this conversation, this series. Can't wait to see what kind of medical examiner analysis you got on some of these victims there, Lisa. And BD, great to join you again for another conversation.
Thank you.
Looking forward to some of your forensic astrology analysis here on the Smiley Face Killers subject. It's really been an interest of mine, as Nick said, this has been an ongoing saga, really, this phenomenon of the Smiley Face Killer victims, victimology of murder has been going on for, at least well over a decade here in America. Quite honestly, I've been following it since 2008. The original detectives who went on the national news media in the spring, this time in 2008, April 2008, on their little sort of a media, not really a full-blown media campaign, but they went on a couple media programs trying to get this message out, something they've been working on for a couple of years by that point. But really, the first case, according to them, dates back to 1997 in New York City. So this is definitely an ongoing saga here in 2024. And we just talked about Riley Strain. We just talked about Riley Strain in Nashville, which, again, he falls right within the victimology of all these other folks we're talking about today, and a lot of similarities between him and another victim we're discussing today within the Greek fraternity system within the college, universities of America here. So, yep, host of Operation GCD right there, JJ Vance. Looking forward to the conversation. Thanks again for the invite. Should be a good one.
Oh, it definitely will be. Thank you very much, sir. And BD, last but not least, let everybody know where they can find your stuff and some of the books that you wrote and everything you got going on.
The books are on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any major online retailer, and I'm also on Twitter, Instagram. My website is strangebutTrueCrime.com. And there's one more thing I'm leaving out. Oh, Linktree is down below in the description.
Awesome, and I will have everybody's links on the bottom as well. Damn, there was something I was going to add, and I can't remember now what I was going to say. Oh, the Riley Strain case. I really would have loved to have added that to this series, but I just think that would probably make it even longer. Because I think that case itself, it's like that could probably be like 2 shows almost, I think, with the amount of stuff that we've even brought up as possibilities and looked into.
Yeah, and I think maybe just an idea for the future, revisiting that when more information is available, because I think 6-12 months from now, there'll be a lot more information available because there's a number. I mean, it's just watching the videos and the interviews of the family. They got a private detective on the case. I mean, they're not, the father and is speaking in a very assertive manner that he's not letting this go. So that's good to see that the family's pushing for more answers in circumstances that they found themselves in, because yeah, it's certainly that young man did not just fall in the river and die, and there's a lot more to that tale.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. All right, so I guess we'll get this party started. Again, like I said, we're going to try to go in chronological order. Probably JJ Vance, unfortunately, because some of the cases he picked are much older ones. He will start it off, and then we'll try to head over to Lisa and have her cover anything she's got, and then maybe I might add some of just the weirdness that I found going on in the area, possibly, and then we'll wrap that person up with BD. So that's the hopefully something like that. So, but we'll start off with you, JJ, since the first one is Lon. Maybe we'll start off with that one if you like. And like, I guess what even made you like pick these people as you go along, talking about them too? If you don't mind.
No, that's a good intro there, Nick. I appreciate it. Yeah, so Lon Dowdle, he was a 25-year-old man who died on or about April 4th of 2002 when he was actually a lot of these victims are college age, like Riley Strain was still in college. This man, Lon Dowdle, was recent graduate of the Auburn University in Alabama, and he was a fraternity member in his college years, much like Riley Strain was, in this recent case. He was also, both part of that college Greek culture, and I'm sure anyone listening to the Idaho 4 series that Nick and I have done on here, and any other discussions, quite honestly, that I appear on in the Occult Rejects, where I often say that I'm interested, generally speaking, in the activities of these Greek cultures, because they seem to be involved in a lot of organized criminal activity over the years. And uniquely, my unique interest with the Greek community to the Smiley Face Killer victimology is, outside of, well, it's kind of disputed, I suppose, but outside of a handful of cases, Riley Strain might be the first one who disappeared wall out with his fraternity brothers. So while other fraternity, victims have been members of fraternities, Riley Strain, in my opinion, was the first one out with his fraternity brothers that would fall victim to this, this Smiley Face killer's victimology of homicide. It could be disputed. I know we discussed in a previous episode, I believe with William Ramsey a few weeks ago, the case of Hudson Lindau out of University of Idaho in Moscow, Idaho, who was friends with the Idaho 4 and had basically fell victim to a Smiley Face Killer style death, approximately 6 months prior to the Idaho 4 murders. However, I would like to argue that's more of a enterprising fraternity, fraternity brothers that likely wanted to cover up the drug trafficking that's going on in that town. Loosely connected, obviously, to the Idaho 4s, because that's obviously the same kind of impetus behind their murders, is what I claim, at least what my assertion is. Anyhow, there's not that many. While there are fraternity members in this victimology or fraternity, some of the victims are members of fraternities in college and post college, whatever that entails in that membership post college. Riley Strain, again, might have been the first one that actually disappeared with his fraternity brothers. Lon Dowdle was not with the fraternity brothers. when he disappeared and died, and on or about April 4th, 2002. Now, they recovered his body 2 weeks later. I believe it was April 17th, 2002. So there was not really any great inquiry into his case. From all the research I've done and investigation I've done, it is not really any great inquiry. His homicide occurred there or his death, what I claim as a homicide, occurred in Covington, Kentucky. So one of the reasons I came across this case was after I had discovered that many, especially these early cases, the canonical SFK cases, if you will, that were in the Drowning and Forensic Case Studies textbook by the original detectives, Gannon and Gilbertson. Those original cases all occurred in and around sites of ancient human sacrifice, these quote unquote Indian mound sites. And once I had kind of reached that conclusion, or found that kind of correlation at least between the mound sites and at least the early SFK victims, and I would actually argue most, if not all, of the SFK victims meet that same criteria. But once I had come across that data, I started looking at more of these other sites and towns and seeing what the strange water drowning deaths that might fit that same, the same characteristics of the SFK victims. And Lon Dowdle's right there, so he kind of hits checks every box of that checklist as far as the victimology goes. And
you know what I thought was weird?
Kind of how I came across him, his case, because he's out. Obviously that's probably a new name to you and you, Nick, and you, Lisa, and BD. If you're familiar with a lot of the SFK victims, this is not a name you commonly see referred to within the SFK victim community. Like, I'm sure he's on some folks' lists, but he's not like, it's not a very common one in case you see it discussed. What were we saying, Nick?
What I thought was weird with him, and I guess maybe like it stuck out to me. It's funny, and it can suck, but I guess it's just part of the work. You could spend an hour trying to like run business addresses and like get nowhere and waste your time and realize there's nothing there, but you're going to look, unfortunately. I was probably screwing around for I don't know how long trying to like look at the Waffle House and get the address and who owns it and this and that. And then it's like I have to start like looking at the map because it's like, well, 311 is really on the other side of the street, but it's the same property. It's just at an intersection. So you start looking at all this stuff, and I guess like I kind of was like, since I was looking at the map in the street oftenly, I guess basically had an idea of what when they tell you what happened. Technically, it's like I'm looking at like I guess so like you walked away from your boy at the Waffle House. You either went in front of the place or you went into a parking lot that basically had a whole bunch of other stores. Like I don't see how your friend just disappeared like that either. To be totally honest with you.
No,
I don't buy that at all.
No, that's a great assessment because I know that Waffle House, that parking lot, and I've been drunk in that parking lot at that Waffle House plenty of times. So I know the environment. It's not an easy place to just disappear from.
Yeah, I mean, technically, even where the Waffle House is, it's kind of like almost in the corner of the place. So I'm like, where did he disappear to? So then if you want to play like maybe they're on the other side. All right, even then, like I just don't get like, it's just to me, it's not in a spot where someone can like, in 5 or 10 seconds just disappear, or you just didn't give a fuck and just walked away anyway.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know what you're saying, and it certainly screams like some sort of malfeasance going on with his friend or the cab driver. But in this case, I mean, for what it's worth, both parties passed the polygraph exam.
You know what sucks though is like the whole thing is like, could you just be leaving shit out that doesn't even make you look guilty about hurting him? It's just like, was there something, and I think me and Lisa might have even brought this up, which is, I wonder if this is an issue with these crimes. These people that they're with may not have actually had anything to do with them, but like maybe they had their own grimy shit going on that they didn't want their girl or their friends knowing that they were doing with this person. So you start leaving out little specifics.
Sure. That's certainly possible, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because you don't want to mention like what you were really doing. Were they really even at the Waffle House? You know what I'm saying? Like, who knows what might have been going on that night that they leave out, which actually could help. It's just they don't want to incriminate themselves to their friends and family, not to the law, really.
Sure. Well, I can go over some of those details of his actual disappearance and discovery and let you know some of my thoughts on that real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you point out, the Waffle House was the last known site in sighting of Lon Dowdle. This is a Waffle House in a fairly urban area across the river from Cincinnati, Ohio. So it's in Covington, Kentucky, right across the bridge. It's essentially an extension of Cincinnati, Ohio, but just on the other side of the river. And it's long had a fairly high crime rate through there, of all sorts of different varieties, violent and otherwise, robbery, etc.
It's funny. I got that feeling just from the Google Earth. I hate to say it.
Yeah,
I was just these guys in the hood.
Yeah, that actually dates back to the Civil War. So the term hookers comes from General Joseph Hooker, who was the general who was stationed there in Covington, Kentucky for the Union Army. And he used to have a whole band of prostitutes, like a whole battalion of prostitutes that would travel with him. So, this whole crime, that town's long been known for its prostitution since then. For example, Jerry Springer, the talk show host, when he was mayor of Cincinnati, he wrote a check to a hooker, in a city check to a hooker in Covington, Kentucky. So, it's got a lengthy history of this kind of activity there. But, generally speaking, you can walk around that area near the Waffle House in their little bar and restaurant district that's right, 200, 300 meters to the north, or I'm sorry, to the south of there, away from the river. You can generally walk in that area and be safe. I've been down there countless times, never had any issues. So, I mean, while there is known for a lot of criminal activity in and around Covington, it's generally not that specific area. They keep that pretty cleaned up as far as policing activities go through there. But that being said, they get out of the parking lot. You got to be aware of your surroundings in that town at all times. I would say for any urban area for that matter. But him and his friend go out drinking. Dowdle's in town from Alabama. He's a salesman for a international fixtures manufacturer out of Alabama. In fact, his father was the vice president of that corporation. So, wealthy family. It seemed like Dowdle he'd be pretty well off for being a young man in his 20s. He wore a Rolex. That Rolex and all of his cash and credit cards were still on his person when they found his body 2 weeks after he disappeared from the Waffle House parking lot. But as the story goes, and again, as both parties attested to later, the cab driver and his friend was from Alabama, but apparently had moved to Cincinnati. So I actually have, while I've never really gotten the impression that necessarily the friend was directly involved. I do suspect that maybe perhaps the friend set him up, had some other dealings going on, or whatever the impetus there was. But the friend doesn't shake out completely squeaky clean to me in this entire narrative. But he claimed, apparently passed the polygraph. But the story goes, the friend's waiting for change from the cab driver, for paying for the ride, and then as he's waiting for change, Dowdle disappears. And again, it's not an area where you're really just disappearing, because it's pretty, like, outside of that one little parking lot with a little shopping center with like 4 stores in the Waffle House, it's pretty open. There's not any other buildings or trees in the immediate vicinity. I mean, you have like you can see for at least 50, 75 meters in every direction. So it's not like he hid behind a tree or fell behind a building. You know what I mean? Like,
that's what I was getting at from the way I looked at it. Like, even that parking lot, it's like an L almost, and the Waffle House is in the corner. Even across from that parking lot, it's not connected, but it's another separate strip of like 3 or 4 buildings. That whole area is like, it's basically like he walked into a U or just disappeared off the street. You know what I'm saying? It's like you had to have. I just don't buy. You don't see that kid, and I don't know the situation, but some of these parking lots have lights. You know what I'm saying? Like this kid just poof.
Oh no, that area's always been well lit.
Or you just looked and was like, the fucking kid ain't there, and you don't care. Like, that's just So I don't know. That's the only way I think it could happen. The way he explains it.
Yeah, exactly. No, it adds to the mystery because again, he's just within a matter of a few seconds, he's just gone. And if you just turned around if you're looking at the Waffle House, if you just turned around and looked the other direction, about 80, 100 meters to the north there towards the river was the Holiday Inn that Dowdle was staying at.
Yep.
So there was nothing in between him and the Holiday Inn. He could see the Holiday Inn from the parking lot of the Waffle House.
I remember when I saw that, I was like, hasn't Jay-Z mentioned the Holiday Inn and Waffle House in a song before?
Yes, he really.
And I was like, yo, this is like fucking Waffle House and Holiday Inn right here.
Yeah, so where the Holiday Inn sits is kind of at like a corner of a creek where the creek hits the Ohio River. And there's a flood wall. There's a big flood wall there. So it's not like you can just walk to the river from there. You have to like go walk downriver, walk around the flood wall. I know this because I've been to the site. And I'm just explaining the circumstances in which they go from the Waffle House to where his body was later found on the other side of he would have had to walk past his hotel and then fallen into the river, but not even really the river. It's more of a, in the springtime, especially, it was more of a muddy area because it could be dry at certain times later in the year. But in the springtime, it was a muddy area on the banks of the Ohio River, and that's where they found his body. It had been searched twice by foot, including dogs, and had been searched by boat going past that area. But in order to even get to that area, he would have had, he would either had to climb a flood wall, basically, from the Holiday Inn side, or walk one of the directions up or downstream to go around the flood wall, because it's an enormous flood wall. I mean, it's not a small structure in which to gain access to. So, but what I think also what that flood wall did was gave that area would have been a great place to dump a body, because it gave concealment from any of the roadway. You can't see, and the cars driving by can't see on that side of the flood wall. The only people that could see would be if you're on the river. But if you're on the river late at night, I mean, you have lights on your boat, so obviously anyone who's dumping a body can see that. So it was a great spot to dump a body. Now, whether or not there was any graffiti at this location, I can't speak to, because by the time I pardon me, by the time I visited this site would have been probably 10 years after his death, 12 years after his death. So, many graffiti there, it's hard to tell what was there when Lon Dowdle's body was clearly dumped there, with all of his clothing, his wallet, this is really kind of a time before cell phones were really all that prevalent. I don't know if he owned a cell phone, but nothing was listed that he had it on his person. And then his Rolex, which according to my research and the reports I've seen, was valued at $10,000, like $9,995. So again, if you're robbing the guy, you're taking that Rolex immediately. Like, that's like me. Maybe you're not taking the wallet because you got to dig through the pocket and you're crunched for time for some reason. But in my mind, there's no way that wallet or that watch is staying on his person. And if he's drowning in a river, and again, how did he end up in this muddy area on the riverbank? Because it's not like the water had flooded and his body got dumped there because of the change in the water levels. That didn't occur. U.S. Geological Survey data can easily show the river heights and show that was not the case during that time. So it really begs the question of how he got there. Now, even more so, back to his quick disappearance, rapid disappearance from the Waffle House parking lot. I honestly don't see a circumstance where there was not a van or a vehicle sitting there waiting to grab this guy. And that's what I was alluding to before with, I don't think his friend may have been directly involved in it, but may have made it come out squeaky clean, because I don't see how Lon Dowdle just disappears without a vehicle literally sitting on the side of that, kind of the side of the building. As you point out, the Waffle House is in an L-shaped parking lot, and sitting on the side of the building, kind of facing towards the riverside of his hotel, there have been a vehicle standing by just to grab the guy. Because other than that, I don't know how you get the guy out of there within seconds to make him disappear. Where the cab driver, who has no play at all whatsoever in this matter, why he also can't find the guy, right? Like
even like, see, I even looked at it from the aspect, see, like in the police report stuff or whatever information I was looking at, it specifically mentions like a different technical address than the Waffle House was at, but it's on like the street side. Now how like the Waffle House is in that corner. If you took that corner all the way to the end to where it's like almost near the street, that is where that number would be. So I was even looking at it as if somehow they didn't even go on the parking lot. They got dropped off at the curb. You know what I'm saying? So then they're going to give cash or whatever for, make change or whatever. I'm just trying to think. And it's like, even from there, you're out by the street, my man. How did you miss your boy in giving change? Where did he? There's only so many places he could go. He didn't cross the street. I would think you'd see that. Yeah, I don't know. It just seems weird to me.
No, it does. And his friend, the friend did not do himself any favors by not looking culpable at all in these activities or the disappearance of Lon Dowdle, because he really didn't participate in the search for Lon Dowdle. In fact, Lon Dowdle's fraternity brothers came up from Alabama, coming looking for them. And it was actually quite honestly, the police didn't really do much either, because it was actually a local psychic in Covington who called the hotline for the police, the missing persons hotline, for tips on Lon Dowdle. She called the tip line and said, "Hey, I'm a psychic and this is where you're going to find the body." And the police were like, "We don't have time for this." So they just gave the tip to his fraternity brothers, and the fraternity brothers went there and they found their friend. So, there's a lot of failures amongst numerous parties here, obviously, and like most of these circumstances, local law enforcement would rather not trouble themselves with doing anything that would cause them to break a sweat. But the fact that the friend who was there when Dowdle disappeared, he's not really that involved in it. The fact that they weren't really apparently that great of friends, that they had, he was just giving him a call because he was in town on business.
Oh, like with Riley Strain, he's hitting up some chick, but we're not involved, which is like cool.
Exactly, yeah. So I think a lot of those kind of tertiary parties in these stories in these narratives that take place, probably more important to figuring out what's going on, because obviously whoever Riley Strain was talking to on his phone, that's an important person to get some statements from and figure out what happened. No different than this fellow with Dowdle, because. Pardon me. Because Dowdle, like I said, he was only in town on business, and he called his friend who had just moved to Cincinnati. Very in the short term, preceding that. So, just a very odd circumstance that this person is not more concerned about maybe where their friend went. And again, they weren't that close of friends that I think the friend in Cincinnati could have been involved in stuff Dowdle was completely unaware of, and he was basically walking into what equates to a spider web with these people.
Not to put you on the spot, but do you know what he did for work? Maybe you mentioned it and I didn't catch it.
Dowdle, yeah, he was a salesperson for I think it was called Mannix. It was an international fixtures corporation out of Alabama. His father was the vice president of the corporation. He was a recent graduate of Auburn and had started. That was essentially his first job out of college there. Again, big company. They had contracts with Kroger. Kroger is the largest. It's headquartered in Cincinnati. It's the largest grocery store chain in America. Roughly 350 billion, I think, market cap each year revenue, something like that.
And his dad was well off because they offered a reward, didn't they?
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah, very, very well off. Yep. Lots of money with that looking up their properties, multi-million-dollar properties and stuff. So yeah, wealthy family. And I think it's what causes somebody like that to get targeted. It's hard to tell, but I think certainly could be activities he's involved in the past. Does that have anything to do with his membership in a fraternity? I don't know. But these fraternities are secret societies, and I'm sure internally they deal with their own problems their own ways, right? So they don't look to outside organizations to deal with their own people. So who knows?
Sometimes you even have to wonder, was that like somebody just being an asshole and it's like fucking with the father? I mean, I just killed one of your kids. There's another plausible scenario for sure. Yeah,
it's a big company, lots of money in that. And who knows? It's whenever you're dealing with an international corporation that's importing and exporting things, you have to ask, what are they importing and exporting? Because you got corporations like Coca-Cola who's been busted more than one time with importing and exporting actual Coke with their products. So
that's funny. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about with him, or?
I think we covered it. Yeah.
I think another interesting thing just to mention that I'm sure may even come up with other cases, but I did find it interesting again with the Riley Strain case. These people obviously weren't robbed.
Oh yeah, obviously. Yep.
They always still end up either they have the stuff on them, or TikTokers happen to find it. But it obviously didn't get stolen, even though it was gone for a few days. Who knows? All right. So
that TikToker thing with Riley Strain, though, that's becoming more and more important to me as the more I look at that and consider that case. Because I can't find any notification that Riley Strain was missing size 15 cowboy boots prior to them finding his debit card. And those girls on the TikTok that found his debit card said they were looking for size 15 cowboy boots. So not only was he later found without his cowboy boots, how did they know he was size 15 is my question.
Oh, yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, something to think about. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting case. All right, so Lisa, I didn't know if you. Sorry, I don't remember which cases you actually have to add, but
I'm just going to show you Dowdle, and how do you pronounce his last name, JJ?
I just call him Dowdle, but I'm not good at pronunciations, Lisa. So your guess is as good as mine.
No worries. Apologize for mispronouncing the name. So the medical examiner that was assigned to the case was out of Kennington County and his name was David W. Southoltz. Now, according to the limited autopsy report that I was able to take a peek at, I believe he tested positive for cocaine. So they may have been, partying and all that other stuff, and cocaine was still in his system when they tested for it, or it came up on the tox screen. But one of the things that I wanted to mention before I get into the coroner himself is that where he disappeared from was literally within eyesight of the Cincinnati Enquirer building, which in some of these web sleuth chats, they're saying it's so odd because the Cincinnati Enquirer basically got the story from Associated Press and then buried it in the local news station. They didn't even make a big deal about it, even though it's literally happened in their front yard. But the actual coroner, I believe, had indicated that the tox screen came back with that yes, he was lying on the bank with his feet in the water and his arms spread out onto the shore and covered completely in heavy mud, face down. Body was shirtless, no shoes, no socks, pants still on. And like you said, JJ, he wasn't robbed. He still had his cash, credit cards, Rolex, and so forth. So the ME himself was very hard to dig through and find, but something came up recently. He was the coroner. He was the elected coroner for Kenton County for 30 years. And he was recognized, let me get this one out first. He was recognized by his local community as a pioneer of addiction treatment in Northern Kentucky. And he was actually one of the first doctors to ever become qualified to treat the condition with medication. Well, around 2022, 2023, a federal jury in Covington found this guy guilty on 12 counts involving 3 patients. And basically what they're charging him with is that he basically ignored patients' failed drug tests and didn't do adequate screening. And it led to the death of 2 patients. What ended up coming of those 12 counts was that they charged him with illegally dispensing opioids, everything from Oxycontin, Klonopin, Ambien, Valium, and violated the whole Controlled Substance Act in itself. So I believe he is being sentenced to prison now, and his medical license has been revoked. But it seems like he may have had this history of drug involvement, trafficking of some sort, not trying to accuse anybody of anything, but it seems like there had been foul play. I mean, you have this long-standing respect in the community for over 30 years. You're one of the MEs that basically this case falls into your lap, and immediately the autopsy report was not very thorough. It was immediately ruled accidental drowning due to intoxication. And then I believe the dad was not happy with that ruling. But obviously, I think at that point in time, these cases were not well heard of or anything like that as they are now.
That's true.
So I believe that it kind of spiraled down the whole, his dad, I think his dad ended up dying, or his brother ended up committing suicide or something like that. There was some sort of event that led to the demise of the family itself. But I found that to be odd that the medical examiner was not very thorough in his autopsy report, and yet all this other stuff was going on in the background with the opioid stuff of him prescribing it out to patients wanting opioids.
Could be a shady doctor. It's fun. This reminded me of totally off the topic, but it's just interesting how you have shady doctors involved. When we covered the Fellowship of Friends, that cult, they had the cult compound, which I think had a different name, and then I think the winery was separate from it, and it was up a little bit above them. And you basically would come out of this one place, you'd make a left, you go to the first road, you make a right, you take that all the way up for a while, and then you make a right, and you're right there. I mean, it's really close. And there was a doctor that was associated with, I think, the winery, that when I looked him up, same thing, prescribing opioids to people who aren't screwed up. It's basically a, Dr. Feelgood. And he got busted, and lost his license because of it. And the weird thing I thought, too, is that there was one, little, I don't know if it was a gas station, but kind of a place you could stop to get, a quick stop. In between there in between those two places and that one little path you take, that doctor's name was also on that company as well. So it's like, yo, what's going on over there with that little path? What's up with that store? Is that a drop off? Like, do you own, like, what the fuck's going on? It was just really weird with that cult, I thought. But it reminded me of the same situation. A doctor that was over prescribing opioids. Very weird. So, yeah, I guess, just my opinion, but that doctor may not have been the most thorough person.
Yeah, certainly not the most honest, it seems.
Yeah. I think it was in his benefit to not be.
Sure.
The only stuff I really got to add much to with this, and the reason why I even did this with JJ stuff, I'm going to be honest, I probably had worked on like the Austin, Texas stuff probably like 2 weeks before I got into JJ's. So there's a lot of stuff that I noticed with Austin, Texas that I looked for as well with some of these cases. When we do get to Austin, Texas and the cases over there, it's like every secret society that's like somebody is like in that area. So I thought that was weird. And I just happened to look again because when we do get to, I guess it'll be like a little bit of a sneak peek. When we get farther down the road, I do think there is stuff going on with like the Lions Club possibly. I definitely think the Rotary Club and the Masons, because it's just, as we get into it down the road, I guess you'll see where I'm going with it. But so I just wanted to show that, like, if something was going along with those people in some of these other situations, I just wanted to see if they were close by. And over here, over by the Waffle House, you do have a lodge. It's like a 7-minute drive. It's like 2 miles away. You do even have a Lions Club that, due to, I guess, the way you have to drive, it does look like it's about 13 minutes, but I mean, they are a little bit closer than that, in my opinion. The Waffle House is right next to Rotary Club right here.
Oh, interesting. Yep.
See,
that's the county. Just real quick, if I may interrupt, Nick. That's the county building right there that Rotary Club is adjacent to. The county sheriff's department, county administration, stuff like that.
And the Rotary Club, why I'm kind of focusing on them a little bit, is they do have boats. And then some of the reasons why this may be silly, but some of the reasons why I even was interested with the Lions Club is that going back to the Idaho 4, their coroner admits on one of her sites that she was in the Lions Club. And those are Masons without the aprons. All of these are either orders that came from Masons or do have ties to Masonry. So they're all like, in a sense, Masonic inner orders. So I think it's interesting to include all these things possibly. And then we had another. I added the Kiwanis Club because who knows about those two. I think me and JJ had even said before, if you're pulling into a town or you're in a town and they have like one of their signs up with the signs of like telling you where you are, you should start to like maybe wonder what's up with that. And for me out here, the Kiwanis Club is definitely one of those that you will see those signs, those big circular discs stuck onto a sign telling you what part of Long Island you just went into.
Yeah. I always joke that's how you know that who's running that town when you're driving into town and you see the sign up there saying,
"Yo, I shit you not." You know what I've thought about doing, but I was like, this is probably going to cost way too much money, even if I do it cheap. I was like, I want to make the Occult Rejects a little sign like that. I'm going to start sticking them because, like, I think if you look at it, they're just using like a screw and a bolt, and they're adding it to the stop sign themselves, probably.
Yeah.
And, maybe they just don't take it off. I don't know. Maybe they do get permission. Who knows? And I was like, I could easily make my own and stick it right underneath theirs. And screw it right to the sign. I thought about doing that just as a joke and see like if these motherfuckers gonna rip it off. And then the best thing is that they'll actually go and probably Google and see who I am.
There you go. Some guerrilla marketing.
Yeah, more minds to infect of who I am.
Well, if I may add a couple weird things about Covington there after looking at the map that I thought was interesting. That Kiwanis you just showed on that last slide, that sits right there at the bridge. It's called the Roebling Suspension Bridge. It's the guy who designed the Brooklyn Bridge. It's a miniature version of the Brooklyn Bridge. It sits there. So this Covington's got a long history of some very powerful and I would say also organized crime activity. The mafia that opened up Vegas used to run Newport, which was the town you showed the Lions Club in. And Covington, that was all run by the mob that started Vegas. In fact, they were still running those areas until the late 70s, at least. There's an infamous fire that occurred there in Newport called the Beverly Hills Supper Club, which was some place like Sinatra and other acts would go play over the years. But that was a mob run joint that was nice. Mob run joint that, seems to indicate that the mob still runs in our modern era. The mob still has a very strong presence there in Newport and Covington, Kentucky.
I do think in some situations, I do think, as crazy as it may sound, I do think the Masons and the Mafia work together or hand in hand at times.
Sure.
I mean, there's been times, like I know I've mentioned it 100 times on the show already, but I mean, there has been times where the Mafia, I think, got busted running coke for Masons. So, I mean, I don't know. Just to me, I don't think there's like that much of a, I guess, degree of difference, or separation with them. I do think there's certain things that it's very much secret society in itself.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's just, I don't know. Very weird.
But it wouldn't surprise me if like mafia families have their own Masonic lodges, right? Like that seems like that'd be a pretty reasonable expectation. I
mean, this is like even how I kind of look at it sometimes. It's like, I've said, and I will preface this now, when I point at these secret societies, I'm not saying this is everybody. There are plenty of people that are actually in there thinking they're doing the right thing and actually making a difference with no harm. Or, they're not trying to do it for any screwed up reason. And like, let's say like you just had a couple of people in the mob or the mafia that were like, got high up and took advantage of, things that they're in. Like, how do you, like, it could even be something like that, which is organized crime within a few areas that are running those types of places or temples and lodges. You have no idea like how it got to that point, but I have wondered, like, could there actually be people in organized crime that are also in these things? Because it's a real good cover. Like I bring up Ocean's 11 all the time as a joke, but like that, in my opinion, is exactly how, if the Rotary Club wanted to get involved, you would have no problem because you're expected to be on the water. Over at Gilgo Beach, the Rotary Club are the ones who sand that area. So if you're dumping sand in hookers, nobody's probably going to notice the hookers. It's just the Rotary Club sanding Gilgo Beach like they normally do. That's all that is. It's the Rotary Club. You have no idea what they're dumping over there.
And probably people within the Rotary Club don't even have any idea what they're dumping over there.
Yeah, they could be bringing them out. They could be just bringing them out into the water and dumping and just waiting for the, knowing the way the water works. Eventually, so you're going to bring them up on shore. Like, you really, when you're doing it in plain sight, nobody thinks anything.
Yeah.
And you have to. I do think, my opinion, that's even part of the magic. As silly as it is. Any good occultist or magician is also going to realize that in order to pull the crime off right, you're going to have to visually mindfuck people. And if you want it to be popular, and you want it to sound juicy, and you want to somehow make money off of GoFundMes or other things, book deals and movies, you're really going to have to make it look, salacious.
Sure.
I think we got a lot of that going on now with some other crimes. All right, so I'm done running my mouth, and now it's BD. I'll pull up your slides, and I'll let you do your thing.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing about the clubs. I remember John Gotti and his gang were hanging out at the Brooklyn Hunt and Fish Club. Oh. That was where they all met.
Nice.
And that was kind of like their lodge. It was a tavern. It's been in a couple of mob movies, but that was where their so-called lodge was. And they'd all sit and, have dinner and drink and stuff. And it was a regular meeting place.
Sure.
Just like a Masonic hall or a lodge.
Yeah, definitely in line with these kind of Elks and Moose Lodge kind of atmospheres.
Right. Same exact thing.
Yeah,
and so anyway, with Lon, I was fortunate to get 2 different times where I could look at 2 different charts, and they're real interesting. The first one is when he was last seen. And I usually use that kind when somebody goes missing, which he did. But I also like to use if they are found, because sometimes that's all I have. I don't have the last seen, but I have the found. In this case, I have both. So I was able to really see some interesting things. First thing I want to say, JJ, is these charts back up what you said relative to this not being a missing person, that this was not a case where he walked off from a cab.
Oh, nice.
The cab driver and his friend are very sketchy, and they fit into the scenario in both of these charts. The first thing I want to point out is real interesting. I like to look at patterns. And so the first one if you look at the bottom half of the chart, it's tenanted with planets. What's on top are not planets. But I'm just pointing out, it's like what we call a bowl. And it's on that portion of the chart is that which is not seen. The upper portion is that which is public. So of course it's 2:30 in the morning and all the activity is in the dark. And nobody really knows what happened. I mean, a few people know what happened who are obviously not talking.
Sure.
But that is, it's unseen, it's unknown, it's suspicious. And I will say right off the bat that there was a real personal motive behind this case. It's supported by both charts. Somebody had an axe to grind with Lon. And the alibi, so-called by the friend, no. I don't know how much the extent of his involvement, but he fits into what happened to Lon. I'm not saying he did it, but I also see Lon in a car, a vehicle.
Oh,
I see a cab and I also see a vehicle, and also in the second chart. But the reason that bowl is so interesting is every 24 hours things flip. So you're going from April 4th to April 10th from 2:30 in the morning to 1:20 p.m. And you see in the second chart, everything flipped. Everything's on the top. It's public. It's known. His body is found. People have seen him. People are now out and about, and everything is above board, except there's a big hidden factor which relates to the evidence and law enforcement. They're hiding something. It's not out in the open. It's not public like the rest of the chart is. And it also shows that I know he's like in mud and he was face down in mud, and I don't see a drowning. I see a suffocation, possibly something to his head, like either his head was pushed into mud or he was suffocated. I don't see a drowning incident here. It's the head and the throat is highlighted. So that him being there shirtless, shoeless, sockless, but with his pants on and his arms spread sounds somewhat posed. I know that could be the case where somebody has hypothermia and they're taking their clothes off because they suddenly feel internal heat. But I don't think he was there that long. And I will also go to the next thing I was using. I haven't used these before in our work that we've talked about, but I decided to use something called asteroids, which are planets they're planetary bodies. They're very small, but there are thousands of them between the Earth and the orbit of Mars. And they are all named after mythological figures. Wow. It's really fascinating. And they're very useful because they get very specific in terms of crime charts. So what do I see in when Lon was last seen? Exactly on the ascendant is the asteroid Tisiphone. And Tisiphone relates to retaliation and rage toward the unpunished. Somebody, like I said, somebody had an axe to grind with Lon. There was something personal going on. It may also connect to relatives, connections to the family, associates of the family. And so that is a pretty strong one. And there's another one, which is not Greek, actually comes from a Greek root, nostalgia, which is literally connecting to the past. This had something to do with something in his past, possibly involving family relations. Maybe it was a retaliation against his father. I really don't know, but it's highlighted strongly there. And then there's also a Greek name for one of the asteroids that's active, Phaethon, which is you pay the consequences for your actions. Somebody did something, and Lon was the consequence. He was the payback. That's what that it could tie into mob stuff like we were just talking about.
Sure.
Something I want to ask you, BD, just real quick before I forget. Back in the Lon last scene, you had mentioned that you possibly thought something was up with the cab driver. I really don't know what I'm looking at, but like, what's going on with Mercury on that one?
That would be him. And
all right. I was like, I wasn't sure if you looked at it like that too. I assumed maybe you did, but I was wondering if there was something with Mercury that made you think about the Traveler, which I would see as
that's exactly what I looked for, because you can't really see it because of the purple circle at the very bottom. He got covered up because I was Yeah, I just didn't cover him properly.
It's all right.
He's next to the son, which is another perpetrator. So there's two. Could be the friend, because who's from the past? This friend was from Lon's past, where they met up in Covington. And Mercury rules a cab, rules a car, and he's with her. The
transportation,
The transportation, and also in the Lon found on the right-hand side, it's got also reference to a vehicle taking him away.
You know what's interesting? When I had covered The Ninth Gate with Sean McCann, there was a part in that movie where I was showing how I thought they were actually doing like the tarot, kind of imitating tarot and the Tree of Life and actually going a certain route. And in this part, they show Johnny Depp like getting out of the cab. And there was like, I think like the guy was wearing something red on his head. So like to me, it looked like it was going on that one path, I think going from Hood to Gabura. But like the hangman is also involved over there. So like you see the cab and you know that's Mercury because of the fucking yellow and the transportation. And then it's going to Gabura. And then you eventually see once he gets inside this bookstore, his boys hanging. So like I really thought it was like showing kind of tarot or occult symbolism in the Tree of Life. Now I know this dude wasn't hanging, but again, he did say he was positioned a certain way. I mean, could have then that been kind of hangman like? I don't know.
It could be because all the tarot, the major arcana, do relate to signs and planets. So yeah, definitely, they're all connected that way. There was one more asteroid I wanted to mention, which is Pythia, which relates to an understanding of occult rituals. So if this is a ritual thing, and the way he was placed on the bank with his arms outstretched, you're supposed to send a signal to somebody. Your guess is as good as mine, but it's featured. And all of these asteroids, the reason I like to use them is they get really specific. And I wanted to get specific because who knows what happened with these cases. They're just, shrouded in mystery at this point. But I would absolutely question the friend and the cab driver. I also see where in the first one, a strong hint, a suggestion of fraternity having to do with him on that night. And being set up is a very strong possibility. I also see violence. I don't know what came out in terms of physical injury, but there was some violence, maybe by abducting him, violence by pushing his face into mud so that he suffocates. I really don't know. But there was violence. They just scooped him up and he was done for. Also in relation to the third house, which rules travel and your cab and the vehicle, is a sign of evil doing on the third house cusp. And that's when I thought, no way that he just walked away from a cab.
Right.
So that's, see if I'm leaving anything out. That's pretty much, which is funny. You're talking about Waffle House. The sign of restaurant fits prominently in here. Restaurant. So it was in front of someplace. It was front of someplace, but not that was really where they were intending to go. It was a location. That's the gist of what I get from these, and it's definitely foul play, and it was known. People knew him. It was deliberate. It was personal. It possibly had family connections.
That's an interesting analysis.
Doesn't Waffle House also be yellow, the sign?
Yeah.
The sign on Waffle Houses are yellow, too.
Yeah. And to speak to the your analysis there, BD, on the
it's even
confirmation there.
Checkered floors on the waffle. Like if you think when you make a waffle, it's kind of checkered, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But yet, if I could just add some confirmation to your analysis there, BD, I thought that was great. But the speak to your analysis of law enforcement hiding something, yeah, I can tell you that 100%.
Yeah.
Because I was a PI in that town, and in Cincinnati, and I definitely have communicated with law enforcement in regards to this case before, and there's definitely something that's going on there that they don't want out. It's something that information they're sitting on.
Yeah, this was a punishment of sorts, and there was also an element of jealousy or envy, like somebody got something that somebody else didn't like. It sounds very mobbish to me.
Sure. Yeah.
But there's a heavy grudge, and he was the price.
No, I think that's a great analysis. I definitely agree with you. He was set up. Yeah, I mean, everything about the case speaks to that. Yeah.
And the charts bear it out. Both of them bear it out. So that was really cool. Yeah.
To your point of the hangman, if you think about it, when a man is hanging from his feet, his arms are kind of out. So he was like almost hung from the water.
Has that crucifix pose to it, doesn't it?
Yeah. The sacrificial son.
And that was in the Delphi too. That was in the Delphi Girls Murder, the hanged man. When we did that one, we did the card.
That's right.
The tarot card, yeah.
Well, see, even the way like I would possibly look at that is like with the son involved, I could wonder, is this something to do with the family? Because like I see like this is just the way I look at it. You do have like a child can be a symbol for Tiferet. And if you want to go up to Saturn, now you got a guy eating a child, sacrificing his own child.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, who knows?
It was almost too perfect that he was away from home. So who would suspect that it was somebody from home or from the family that would do that? And yet that would be the way that they would set it up. It's like you have an alibi to be somewhere else and somebody's committing the murder for you, but you have your alibi because you're far away. And the alibi, in fact, is flawed, which is shown in the charts. It's not kosher at all. Neither is the evidence. It's just stuff is hidden. It's not being revealed.
Something ain't right here.
Nope.
All right. Well, I think that was a pretty good first one right there. If you don't mind,
Okay.
JJ, you want to go into the next one?
Yeah, Jared Dione.
Sure. Yes.
April 10th of 2004.
Sounds good to me.
In La Crosse, Wisconsin, which is one of the hotbeds of this smiley face killer activity. I think they got a hot baker's dozen or so of victims, couple survivors in that town over the years.
Shouldn't even be laughing at that, but it's horrible. Baker's dozen.
I was trying to break up the darkness of.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. It's just like, damn, really.
But yeah, I totally know what you mean. I try not to joke when discussing murder and homicidal cults.
Well, listen, I think honestly, I hate to say it, but the only way you can keep going and probably not like really screw your own head up is you have to make jokes every once in a while.
That's probably true. Yes.
Yeah.
No, so I think Jared Dione is one of the most, if not the most important one. Well, his cases and another case are the two most important cases in my opinion, understanding what's going on within the smiley face killer victimology kind of phenomenon. So Jared Dione dies, and I'll just quickly touch base on every case, but go back to the details on Dione here. Jared Dione dies April 10th, or disappears April 10th, 2004. He's gone missing for 5 days. They discover his body in the water there in La Crosse, Wisconsin. Much like Riley Strain, though, in the days he was missing, personal items of his were seemingly planted there along the riverside, right where his body, well, in this case at least, right where his body would later be found. His hat was hung on a light post, and days later, his body was found. Jared Dion's was right there, right beyond where his hat was, hung at a park, in a prominent mound site in La Crosse, Wisconsin, in what is called Riverside Park. It's the confluence of three different rivers into the Mississippi. Well, two different rivers pouring into the Mississippi. So,
wasn't it a Boston Red Sox cap?
Might have been actually. Yeah. Might have been. I don't recall specifically, but it was definitely a red cap. Yeah. The other case is Mac Rosicki. Mac Rosicki dies December 23rd, 2005, so roughly 20 months later, and roughly 200 miles away, but which is interesting. Roughly 150, 200 miles downstream from Jared Dione, Mac Rosicki dies. Interestingly enough, they both were on the same high school varsity wrestling team, approximately 180 miles from the town they both died in. Different towns, one La Crosse, Wisconsin, the other one Dubuque, Iowa, East Dubuque, Illinois. However, those were both roughly, 180 miles or 160, 180 miles from their hometown in Heartland, Wisconsin, which is a suburb of Milwaukee. And I think to really understand whatever's actually going on here, whatever's going on with the smiley face killer, victimology and this whole phenomenon of these SFK victims, is to understand how is it that Jared Dione and his high school varsity wrestling teammate die 20 months apart, roughly 200 miles away from each other, of these same circumstances. And I think that's key here. But back to Jared Dion's death, he's last seen at a bar in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and he's getting on, seemingly doing a responsible activity. He's getting on a drunk bus, a bus that takes drunk college students from the bars downtown back to campus. So that's seemingly he's making a responsible decision there, standing in line to get on the drunk bus, and all of a sudden his friends say that he just disappeared. Much like Dowdle, he was there, all of a sudden he was gone. And I would actually assert again in this circumstance that Jared Dione was likely targeted and kidnapped and abducted when no one was paying attention while standing in that bus line. But nonetheless, his personal effects were found, on the riverside, and then again, his body's found 5 days later in the just off the Riverside Park there in La Crosse, Wisconsin. So that's a quick rundown on his death there.
Wasn't he his family was law enforcement?
So that's Matt Krasicki. Matt Krasicki's father was the U.S. Marshal for the Eastern District of Wisconsin.
Yes.
And his stepmother was a ranking member of, I believe, ICE. Pardon me. I believe Customs or DHS, I guess, at that point, really, because ICE had been combined with DHS by that point. But yeah. I mean, there were some prominent law enforcement figures. This is one of those cases with prominent law enforcement figures involved in the family that doesn't seem to impact the ability to solve the case or the ability to get the authorities who are investigating it to do anything.
Gotcha.
So I'm having an issue pulling up my slides. I don't know what's going on here. I have slides.
No worries. But yeah, to the point of where these two, Jared Dione and his wrestling teammate, fall victim to these same circumstances, nearly 2 years apart and 200 miles apart. In my mind, there's something in their past that is going to solve that would at least bring great clarity to what's going on here. May not solve the SFK victim, phenomenon situation here, but it's going to bring great clarity to whatever is actually going on, because I'm not a coincidence. So there's no way that I'm going to believe that these two men have nothing. They just died again, nearly almost 2 years apart, 200 miles apart, and there's nothing connecting them. Like, whatever's going on here has something to do with their past, intersects with the past of these two men at some point in time. And Krasicki, again, law enforcement, and he's involved in, what he probably didn't understand was shady activities, but what I would point to now as being some very suspicious employment circumstances he had found himself in. Again, he probably didn't understand what he had walked into, but he was canvassing the area. The area that he dies in Iowa, he was canvassing for Acorn, which is run by John Podesta, which could fill up all sorts of time talking about that man's shadiness in the cult and what I would assert as a cult activity. But nonetheless, Krasicki was working for Acorn, canvassing the area of Iowa and Illinois, east of Book, Illinois, where he later disappears and dies. So, I think in some circumstances like that, he could have been targeted just for being in that organization. Yeah. But so there are a lot of strange connections with both these cases, with both these victims, the Jared Dione and the Matt Krasicki. I just think there's no way that there's not more to this whole phenomenon by understanding what the past of those two men and what happened with their deaths.
One thing I wanted to add about Matt Krasicki was there was a case in Michigan that when they found that body, and I cannot remember the name of the victim in Michigan, but there was a graffiti with the word Sinsinua, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think graffitied near there. And then it was Matt Krasicki that was found on the road named Sinsinua, right?
Well, you're right. So that was the last place he was seen with the strip club he was at, which I would actually argue there's strong circumstances or strong reason to believe that he was actually that the bouncer that's involved in that strip club situation was actually involved in kind of setting Krasicki up for this setting him up for a trap, basically, for his murder. But yeah, his body was later recovered at the confluence of the Sinsinawa River and the Mississippi River. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the elements when I first started visiting Smiley Face Killer sites, victims sites, and mound sites in various towns across America, and realizing I'm visiting the same locations. I went back and looked at some of the earlier details from what the detectives, who came up with this theory had produced. And that's what I came across with Sinsinawa was one of the things that caused me to look back at the mounds more and, this being a ritual human sacrifice, because that Sinsinawa mound specifically, or Sinsinawa Creek, if you follow the creek up from the river, 30 or 40 miles from where he passed, where his body was located there, Krzyzicki's, you'll find that goes up to a Sinsinawa mound in Wisconsin. That's where the name of the creek comes from. And then you start looking at some of these Sinsinawa mounds, these quote unquote rattlesnake mounds, and they're used for human sacrifice. I mean, there's anthropological studies today that have been conducted on numerous of these Sinsinawa mounds, and those were sites of ritual human sacrifice. So I think, speaking to the clues you mentioned, Lisa, from the original detectives, Gannon and Gilbertson and their team, and some of the details they put out, the Sinsinawa that was graffitied at the site in Lansing, Michigan being another hotbed of activity for these victims. I think that's an important detail. Yeah, I think there's more to this whole Sinsinawa and mound aspects of the Smiley Face killers.
And the reason I bring that up is because I think at some point somebody had mentioned, or I read somewhere, that it has a Native American aspect. And if you look back at, I believe, the meaning of it itself, it was alluding to the fact that they wanted to somehow get retribution for taking their land. Because I think that what had happened is that they were going to land grant this back to the Native Americans that were living in that area. And then somehow with taxes and everything, none of them ended up getting any of this money or any of this land, sorry. And then, so they believed that because of that word, they thought that maybe there was a Native American element in there and that they were taking the sons of the white man.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's an interesting thought for sure.
I can't speak to the validity, but exactly. It just was one of those things that I thought was interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's a good starting theory. I think the detectives had in a lot of this stuff, and I think they eventually dropped a lot of that stuff. Like they weren't looking from later interviews they gave. They weren't really looking into that aspect, and I would say that they were probably correct the first time in their assessment, because I don't think much is understood about these mounds. Like I don't think I know for a fact, after looking at them myself for many years, I have no greater understanding of why these are of an occult importance than I did, 10 years ago necessarily. But, I think they are of an occult importance. I think numerous organizations and groups and secret societies find these sites to be important. And I think that, I honestly am of the belief that there's modern incarnations of ancient organizations or just new kind of cult organizations today that are using these sites for their old purposes. So that's really my belief of what I see when I'm looking at the Smiley Face Killers is I see, cults of a modern era, whether or not they're new incarnation of cults or old incarnations of cults. That's not really important. What the important part is they're using these ancient sites for ritual human sacrifice purposes.
Right. I think so too. Can I talk a little bit about the MEs on these two cases? I thought these were really interesting. So we have two MEs, John Sears, and the other one is Dr. Lindsay Thomas. And you'll remember where you heard her name after I tell you exactly where you heard her name. So one thing that's interesting with these is they had roughly the same exact medical examiners. And the reason for this is because a majority of these cases are happening in La Crosse County. And John Sears is affiliated with the Minnesota Regional Medical Facility as well. And I believe either takes it to that facility or defaults it to that facility, but he himself has also done cases as well. In fact, I believe he for sure has done, let me pull that up real quick. He has done for sure Craig Myers, Luke Homan, Anthony Skifton, and now Jared, Dione, and Matt Krasinski. So that's already 5 Smiley Face bodies that he's already been involved with. Lindsay Thomas as well, like she's, kind of the head of all this. So a little bit of background on John Sears. He's chief medical examiner in La Crosse County, served the U.S. Navy as well as in the U.S. Army. He's part of the Blue Knights Motorcycle Club, and he served on the La Crosse Drug and Alcohol Task Force, Child Fatality Review Team, and basically was a pillar of the society. He's hired as the La Crosse County Chief Medical Examiner in 1994. And so when we see that a body turns up in 1997, he's employed there. Whether he touched the body, don't know. And then he retires in 2013. So we know that from that time frame, he's in and around that area. He's the one that conducts the autopsy on the Craig Myers, Luke Homan, whatever, the following that I just, not whatever, but the boys' names that I just mentioned. But there's also some publications indicating that he also was involved in Richard Havlati, Charles Blatz, Nathan Kapfer. I mean, the list is like at least 10 or 12 that he has at least overseen or been somewhat tangentially involved with. He's also known for conducting the autopsy on the 7-year-old that was suspected of dying of bird swine flu back in the day. So that's pretty interesting. He also did an interview for Cosmo, and they talked to him about these cases. And he basically said that there is, and I quote, no physical evidence to support the theory that foul play was involved. Okay. So Lindsay Thomas, she is the chief medical examiner there in the Minnesota regional area. And she worked there since 1999, and then I believe retired in 2012. So you're seeing, how much of the time span that is. But specifically also in Hennepin County, 2013 and 2016. Let me tell you why Hennepin sounds familiar. So Hennepin was the county that was the place where the Derek Chauvin murder trial took place. And she was actually one of the state witnesses for that trial. She had retired, but she was a secondary witness to her colleague, Andrew Baker, that testified that the way that Chauvin was held down, that the way that Floyd was held down was in fact why he died. Now, if you listen to the whole thing, and I'm not going to go through, that's beyond the scope of this this episode, but if you hear about it, basically they are in favor of the prosecution, right? And they are claiming, that it was the police involvement as to why George Floyd died the way he died. And at some point they are kind of walking them through and saying, well, he also had drugs in his system. He also had heart failure. He also had this and that. And I believe that when that didn't suffice, they call in Lindsay. And Lindsay basically goes above and beyond and basically testifies that it was the primary mechanism of death by asphyxia. And it was because of that. So it's her testimony that pretty much slam dunks the deal for them. Another thing is that Lindsay, her autopsy, she did an autopsy on Lucas Homan, and he was also found in the Mississippi River. So she also, that's showing evidence that she's also involved with Sears in looking at these bodies that are being pulled from the Mississippi River. One of the things that I found about Lindsay was that she is mentioned in Gannon Gilbertson's book where they're discussing these cases. And they go into specific detail of the discrepancies with the autopsy. One in particular is that I believe they were able to look at one of the bodies, and they were saying how there was all of this artifacts on the actual eye to indicate, what time of death or what may have happened or whatnot. And yet when you look at the ME's description, Lindsay Thomas's description, it's extremely short, and basically it talks about the color of his iris and not really much more, when there was so much more that you could discuss. And then in addition, she didn't discuss discoloration of the abdomen, and then goes into length of all the things that I believe when they went and looked at it or looked at a previous autopsy, there was a lot left out by Lindsay herself. Lindsay Thomas also works for the Utah State Medical Examiner's Office, Clark County's Medical Examiner's Office in Las Vegas, Anno County in Minnesota, and Davidson County Medical ME's office in Nashville, Tennessee.
Really?
She's well published and has a lot of publication basically on procedural and methodological forensics, case reports, proceedings, what have you. She is listed in one of the science publications of a book involving a story of a long-standing ethical dispute between prosecutors and forensic scientists in Minnesota. So she's part of that team with the state, and basically testifies for the prosecution team for the state in many of these states. So I found that to be peculiar, to say the least.
It's kind of interesting, actually. Very.
It's very interesting, yeah. And when you mentioned Hennepin County, I wonder, was she the ME for Chris Jenkins?
Yes. Sorry, thank you for mentioning that.
Oh, yeah. And that's another case where the autopsy was wildly jacked up. I mean, it makes you wonder if Stevie Wonder did the autopsy.
So
Ray Charles could have seen that shit.
All of them. Both of them. She testified in the Mark Jensen trial that he was not involved, that he was free and clear, and that his wife had committed suicide. But then what ended up happening with the court going over is that she, in fact, did die of poisoning that came from him. So he was convicted. So it's very interesting that, because her testimony was that her death was likely suicide. Yet, and I think it was because of the letter that they ended up deciding that it was not suicide and that it was poisoning. But yet it's completely goes against what Lindsay testified. I keep saying Lindsay, Dr. Thomas in court. So yeah, she apparently has history with very high profile cases.
It seems that way. Yeah. Mm-hmm. This all seems very interesting because one of the things I've often considered over the years is, relative to the smiley face killer stuff, is that the victims in cities are chosen based upon the cult's ability to execute these ritual homicides. So, and one of the important factors, obviously, is you got to control the ME's office. And an example of that is the Dakota James case right now. It's still kind of playing out in Pittsburgh, has been for 5 or 6 years now. 5, I guess, 2019 maybe. So the district attorney's office is like, look, we think this is a murder. We think this is a homicide, and this was all a product of the Gannon and Gilbertson team and their as highlighted in their Oxygen TV series they did on this case. It was real time to when these events were transpiring with Dakota James. They convinced the district attorney's office, like, hey, this is a homicide, but the ME's office will not, in Allegheny County there in Pittsburgh, will not declare it a homicide. Mm. So that's what I mean by the important factor of controlling the ME's office versus maybe the district attorney's office.
The interesting thing with that, with you bringing that up, Dr. Lindsay Thomas solo authored a paper talking about how the ME's role can pivot between acting like a sheriff, acting like a jailer, acting like a liaison for media, and the go-betweens, the county, the city, the state, and the public.
Interesting.
I mean, that's another reason why I even find, not to keep going on it, but like Kathy Mabutt with the Idaho 4. I mean, that lady, it's like, when you see her interviews or anybody talk to her, she's like, yeah, well, there were some cuts. They might have been stabbed. They're all dead. Like, that's all like you're really getting out of this lady. And it's just like, and you're in the Lions Club. It's just like, you're kind of giving such bland answers just so there's like nothing to look at. You know what I'm saying? It just seems very weird. I don't know. I don't trust
it does for sure. And speaking to the I thought that was interesting. I guess I didn't realize the lacrosse victims were transported to the Minnesota Regional Medical Center for ME's studies or their autopsy. But that's what happened in Idaho 4 also. They got transported from Moscow up to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho for the actual medical examinations because Kathy Mabutt can't do the medical examination. 1 and 2 didn't have the facilities apparently in Moscow, so they had to travel a few hours away. That's interesting that they're doing that in lacrosse too. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I got some of my stuff that I thought was interesting with these people that I think were in charge or in the force at the time when this crime happened. Unfortunately, I couldn't bring up the slide, so bear with me here. This one's Chief Edward Kondracki, if I'm even saying that right. And it does show, I mean, these are possible. There's a lot of lacrosse here. There is a bunch of different companies under this guy's name Who know if they're all his, but I'm assuming some of them probably are. Then you have the assistant police chief, who is Robert Abraham. You got a couple of him that come up in lacrosse that I think I do go into. And one is K.R. Abraham Properties. And the reason I'm showing this, again, is because sometimes of the stuff that I saw that was popping up when I was covering leases in Texas, I saw a lot of properties and a lot of investment companies under people's names. So I find that interesting. So this one, you do have him. It even matches the M. I made sure that matched. And then again, Robert Michael Abram. So it's like, these are definitely him. That's Investigative Associates. And when you go to that website, it even will show him. And it specializes in fair and impartial investigations for public and private sectors, based in La Crosse, Wisconsin. They criminal investigations, internal investigations, private investigations, and then they also specialize in traffic and boating investigations, surveillance investigations, and harassment investigations. And there you have him, Robert Abraham, president. And one little thing I did add down here is a Rotary Paul Harris Fellow. Now, in order to do that, you have to donate, I think, at least $1,000 to the Rotary Foundation. I don't know if this is also him, but somebody by the name of Robert M. Abraham Jr. gave them a painting to sell, too, for donations. Then you also got Boathouse 40 LLC under his name. And then you have the Cooley Region FOP Lodge 20. And that has Sean Kudrin on it, who is the new police chief as of now. Sorry, we switched police chiefs. And that is the Fraternal Order of the Police that his name is under. And then he is also associated with a company called Mississippi River Cities and Towns. So we have this guy who's the new police chief. He's got a Fraternal Order of the Police, FOP, which in my opinion is another order. I mean, right there, Order of Police.
Oh, big time.
You know, he's associated with that, and now he's got Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative. And you look that up, and I mean, you got a ton of people on here. You got the mayor of the city of La Crosse on that, Mitch Reynolds. He's even on there. And you look them up, and they are Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative. You got all these people on here. I just threw a couple of names. But you got a lot of mayors, a lot of people. And they do.
Yeah, so it's like, that's kind of like a trade group, I guess, kind of, like maybe?
Yes.
Comprised of various city mayors, maybe. Looks like they're trying to probably stimulate some tourism, maybe, in their economies. What's the goal of this organization, do you know?
I not much, no.
That's what it seems like. They're trying to do, maybe economic development.
I think it was more of like them trying to make, like, I guess, really, I hate to say it, it's probably almost like, in my opinion, some of the worst things about this is probably like all them coming together and having the same ideas to push on to their areas. Like, I even think it's kind of like, this is where we're going to come to and talk about how, like, this is how we made our areas great, and this is how we're going to do it here and there. I think it was a lot like that, too.
It connects La Crosse and Du Bois in the same club, doesn't it? And there's Du Bois, Iowa, listed right there.
And then I did find a video of theirs. I wasn't going to play it. It wasn't really worth, like, the strike or the whatever. Probably not a strike, but just, get hit with the copyright thing. Rotary clubs partner with Mississippi River Cities and Town Initiative. So now you're going to kind of, like, in a sense, back to the Rotary Club. And that one guy did at least donate $1,000 to the Rotary Club.
Yeah,
so
and
you
I
got
know
the police
Masonic lodges, and I'm not saying right, wrong, or indifferent. They often get credited with, like, oh, everyone in the town is Masons, and they're all organizing in this Masonic lodge. I'm not saying that doesn't go on. What I'm saying also, though, is I've actually seen that going on in Rotary clubs more frequently than I've seen going on, and that I've found evidence of going on. And this is investigations I conducted as a private investigator. I saw criminal activity getting organized in Rotary clubs more frequently than I did in Masonic lodges. Again, I'm not saying the Masonic lodges aren't used for that, or anything like that. I'm just commenting that I think it's overlooked. Rotary clubs, as you drive into town, most towns will have that sign saying Rotary Club meets at Tuesdays at the Holiday Inn. They're the ones. That's a good indicator. They're the ones calling a lot of the shots around that part. And I think there's a lot more to that. The conspiracy culture, if you will, it doesn't consider amongst these other organizations that are not named the Masons.
I don't know if it was it could be even somebody that I cover later down the road. I think there was somebody that was in the Rotary Club, and when I found the address, it may have been something different, but it went back to a hotel room, at a motel. I was like, so that you guys are renting this room for the day and you meet here for 3 or 4 hours?
Right.
Or then it's how could that really be of worth them doing? Because you're going to have to pay probably a whole day unless they have short stays there. Or do you know the person also running the place and they're giving you a deal?
Or they,
what I'm saying? Think about that. I mean, everybody's going to have to split the cost who wants to come to that meeting unless someone's flipping the bill. So who wants to go to hang out with your fucking boys for a few hours and have to fork over, $30, $40 if there's only 5 of you? You know what I'm saying? Every fucking week? Screw that. That's $120 a month in dues. You know what I'm saying? So maybe the room's really cheap.
To your point about the businesses, and I think I mentioned this to you, Nick, that so Matt Krasinski is in East Dubuque, Iowa, right? Illinois, sorry. And he's visiting the River Queen, or he's last seen the River Queen. On that street is a bar called My Brother's Place, and it belongs to the franchise of Brothers Bar, which originated or headquartered in La Crosse, Wisconsin. It is notorious, according to the Web Sleuths blogs, that many places where My Brother's Bar or My Brother's Bar franchise establishments are, that college kids will be kicked out onto the street and somehow end up drowned. I couldn't find anything further than that. It was hard to find something with Brothers Bar. Maybe look into that a little later, but
even if you think of that aspect with these kids getting kicked out, that all that takes is someone to spike the drink and someone to instigate a fight that they know that they won't be the bad guy, regardless of what happens, and the other person will get kicked out into the streets. Yeah. I mean, you literally could even have that as part of the whole scenario to make it sound like it's kosher.
Yeah.
That's exactly where I was going with that. The TC restaurant group. Remember we talked about that with Ramsey. It sounds exactly. And the TC group originated in Ohio. Yeah.
They were very widespread for sure.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff.
Well, and then speaking of Matt Krasinski, he also got, so I think he was actually almost, if I can just speak to that same point real quick with Krasinski, he was he was at a bar in Dubuque, Iowa, right across the bridge, and he was, the night he disappeared, this has been December 23rd, 2005, and he was throwing a bunch of money around at the bar, buying everyone drinks at the bar at this hotel there. And the bouncer from the strip club that he would later go to and disappear from after getting thrown out of the strip club was at that bar. That bouncer invited him and his friend over to the strip club across the river in East Dubuque, Illinois. So, and he was only there for 30 minutes at that strip club before that bouncer then threw him out on the street. So really, that bouncer seems to be an important figure in the man's disappearance, because had that bouncer not been at the first bar, they may not have gone to the strip club for the bouncer to then later throw him out. And with this Riley Strain situation, that having a quote unquote regular patron of the bar tell the bouncers that Riley Strain has to go, that is super suspect. Because that woman, to my knowledge, has not been identified nor questioned by any capacity.
Right. All right. So, BD, you want to? I guess we'll get into. Lisa, did you have anything else to add or no?
No, that was it.
Okay, I thought so. All right. So the floor is yours, BD.
Okay. Again, with Jared, I was lucky to get 2 times. I understand that he made a phone call to his mother at 8:30. And I was intrigued by that, because I was like, well, what did they talk about? What was his state of mind? What was in his environment? Was something about to happen? And sure enough, when he calls his mother, at that moment, the rising sign changed. The rising signs change every 2 hours, because there are 12 zodiac signs, 24 hours in a day. So each sign takes up occupies the ascendant first house for approximately 2 hours. I thought it was really significant that the sign changed from Libra, which is a social sign. You're out with people, you're having a good time, you're meeting with friends and relations. It changed it into Scorpio almost within seconds of him deciding to call his mother. And I was like, that something serious occurred to him, and I wondered what was going on. Sure enough, in the environment, he is right near the person who is going to abduct him, and he's already in danger. And I'm wondering if I mean, speculating, did he sense something? Why did he call his mom? Did he need some sort of reassurance? What did they talk about? What I see that they talked about was pretty run-of-the-mill what mother and son conversation was about. Family is about. It was about education. It was about his classes, his education, his work. Okay, but he's in danger at this point when he's having this conversation. He's already being seen and stalked by somebody, because the perpetrator's sign is also on that sign of the 12th house, and I take that to be a stalker because it's a secret or a hidden enemy. So somebody's already spotted him, and where I have that blue star up in the upper right corner, that's him, and that's the person who likes him, and there's some attraction or desire, not really sexual, but he's appreciated for his physique, for his physicality. And this person wants him, to have him for some reason. So that's happening. He's on the phone, but he's not last seen for several more hours. When he's last seen by now, Capricorn is rising, our old friend from all the other stories we've covered. And he's also in danger of death at this point in time. And by now, he has been approached or accosted by the person and led off to wherever when he was found. What's really strong here is the four asteroids that I put in the middle. I don't know how to say Hecate or Hecate. She's bad news, okay? She represents occult ritualism, jealousy, and evil actions. All of these are kind of rough. Well, Bacchus is actually somebody's partying. Could be any fraternity on the weekend, could be Bacchus because they're out partying and drinking and all that. That's the scene. Siva is also known as the god of destruction. Could be good, could be bad, but next to what I'm seeing here, it's destruction. The last one is Tantalus, and the word tantalize comes out of that. Tantalus represents frustration of not getting or having what we want. Somebody wanted him for some reason, and I think it's because he was physically appealing, okay? So that is what I see in these charts. And once again, there's subversion, subterfuge, and lying about evidence, about activities regarding him. And yet he was stalked. This started when he called his mother. And as I said, I wonder if maybe somehow he's feeling a little worried, a little insecure. Maybe he didn't even know he was feeling that way. But he calls his mother just as the ascendant goes into Scorpio, a really serious and underhanded sign, the sign of murder. Scorpios don't come for me. This is crime astrology. I'm not really the chart. It's a difficult sign in a crime chart. So it went into Scorpio just when he called his mom. So that was really interesting. And at that point, from that point on, he's in danger. And as he walks away, I don't know how he's attracted away, but that person got his eye on him. And I understand, I think he was at a bar where older guys went, older professional white collar guys hung out. I'm thinking, right, John's bar.
Yes, that's correct. John's bar, yep.
Right, so could have been an older professional. I also see possibly perpetrator, an educator, a foreigner, or a law enforcement member, or a little bit of all three. Could be also relating to religion. When you have this many asteroids relating to these, types of events, there's a religion behind some of that, like we see with Kronos eating his children. It's not a nice ritual, but we see that in the mythology of these asteroids, which, by the way, if I can make a little plug for the next one, the asteroids in the Texas case are absolutely mind-blowing. They are completely mind-blowing because I took those cases that I worked on for Austin through the same process that I did with these, and it's absolutely amazing. So finding out what I have here, Again, there's a desire, there's a sense of hedonism, there's a sense of occult ritualism. They wanted his body for some reason. So pretty much that's what I have for Jared.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
That was great. All right. So now, and then I guess now we would go on to Matt, which would be the last one for you, JJ, for today, right?
Yep. Do you want to go over some more of the details again with Krasicki?
Yeah. I mean, I would assume,
Yeah.
right? Or yeah.
Yep. I think, yeah, I mean, I'll, whatever the details I haven't really touched base, I'll just kind of re-go over those here. So Krasicki, again, high school varsity wrestling teammates with Jared Dione. Krasicki was working for that Acorn agency, canvassing for volunteers, trying to get volunteers for a specific area there in the Dubuque, Iowa, East Dubuque, Illinois region in the weeks preceding his death. He was from Heartland, Wisconsin, and was, for whatever reason, wanted to travel back down to that area that day. I believe he had to get his car out of impound, I believe was the excuse, if I'm not mistaken, for why he had to travel there from Heartland, Wisconsin. And his neighbor ends up driving him down there, and his neighbor was out with him drinking. It was out with him at the bars when he disappeared. That neighbor, much like many of these other characters, seems to avoid any kind of scrutiny from law enforcement so much as to being involved in the crimes. However, at least in this circumstance, I'm not necessarily of the opinion that friend was complicit and culpable in any manner. However, I just think it seems to be a pattern of activities. The law enforcement doesn't seem to focus more on the last person with the victim, especially when they're not that close of friends and it's a strange environment that they're even together anyhow. Nonetheless, I think Krasicki and his buddy were drinking at a bar. They meet this bouncer from the strip club across the river. They go to that strip club. Krasicki's in there for 30 minutes. The bouncer claims that he owes $300 in lap dances and throws him out on the street without a wallet and without his coat. And apparently that's the last anyone ever saw of Matt Krasicki, because he's found almost 3 months later. I think it was March 18th. He's discovered floating in the area, kind of the runoff area from the Mississippi River at the confluence of the Sinsinawa River in the Mississippi. And again, the confluence of rivers is a major mound site, and Sinsinawa being one of these the Sinsinawa mounds, which is where the name the Sinsinawa River comes from. These type of mounds, these rattlesnake. Apparently, there's various interpretations of the term Sinsinawa, but the seemingly accepted interpretation or translation is rattlesnake. And there's various of these rattlesnake mounds across, especially the Midwest, Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, that region, that they were in fact Illinois, that they were in fact used for human sacrifice at these sites in the past. So I think that's very strong evidence with Krasicki that that he is a ritual human. He was a ritual human sacrifice at these, again, same locations of ritual human sacrifice from America's ancient past. And the fact that he's gone for almost 3 months, he's one of the longest missing victims that was actually recovered. I saw a few moments ago someone put up in the chat, Brian Schaefer was a victim out of, it seemed, apparently a Brothers Bar, it seems like, owned from that same franchise. Now, he's never been found. He's one of the few likely victims of the Smiley Face Killer victims whose body's never been recovered. But Krasicki is on the far end of the spectrum when it comes to days missing for many of these victims. For example, Jared Dione was only missing for 5 days before his body was recovered. However, his former wrestling teammate Krasicki was gone nearly 3 months. I think it was about 85 days, roughly. So yeah, there's the long and the short of Matt Krasicki and his death. It was basically quickly ruled an accidental drowning, and his family, again, very prominent federal law enforcement authorities within his father and stepmother, and they couldn't get anything accomplished as far as an investigation into this man's obvious murder.
One thing I was going to mention is that all the actual rulings of death are always accidental drowning due to alcohol intoxication.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's always that phrase. Maybe alcohol intoxication, accidental drowning, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of times, like we saw with Raleigh Strain, with his bank card being found on the riverbank, or with Jared Dione and his hat being found on the riverbank, you know, that decision is already made before the body's even recovered. Like they're like within the authority of the local, you know, whatever city or municipality we're looking at, be it, you know, Illinois, Iowa, or down in Nashville, Tennessee. It seems to me at least that, you know, the local authorities are already ready to just go ahead and stamp it an accidental drowning immediately. And again, that's what was done with Riley Strain. The first press conference, no suspicious, you know, circumstances at this time. You know, it's an accidental drowning. So, I think some of that stuff is already like, you know, there's different factors to building up to that point, but like I think that's already like a prepackaged type of like there's never an inquiry like, hey, was this not an accidental drowning? Like, no, accidental drowning, stamp it, you know, case closed.
I even think like even the whole situation again just seems like a real perfect scenario. You know, instead of like owing money at the bar, now you just owe some chick lap dance money.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And how far back is that going to go? Them maybe asking the chick that worked there that night, did he pay you for all that? And unless he used a credit card, there's no proof he did. So, like, you could easily be making up an excuse again.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Didn't she come out and say that he didn't owe her that much money?
Yeah,
that it exactly was what she said. The actual that the owner was claiming more than what she was saying. No, he actually didn't owe me that much.
Yep. Nope, 100%. And it seems to be that the bouncer was the important figure in kind of creating the entire ruckus altogether by making the claim and throwing him out. So again, you know, it almost seems like once again that he walked into a trap. You know, Krasicki did, and again, he could have been targeted weeks prior because he was frequenting that area for the preceding weeks and months prior to his death, working for that Acorn agency.
Elisa, did you? Oh, that's right. No, you have. You're done. Yeah, you pretty much covered both of them last. So, the only thing I really had to mention, and I can't get the slides to pull up, and it really wasn't much. It's not a big deal. It's just again, I was just looking at these places because I looked at them prior. I don't know if this one really has that much of a connection, but within 4 miles of where the River Queen was, I mean, you will have a Mason Lodge. You will have the Moose Lodge. Then you even have a East Dubai Lions Club, which also meets at some golf club in the Dubai Golf and Country Club. So all those places, and the Kiwanis Club is over there. All these places are within like 4 miles in either, basically from this place. So not that they're really close, but I mean they're close enough. Again, if it has anything to do with some of the future ones, which I do think it possibly does, maybe these, I don't know. I just added them anyway. But I didn't find any connections with anybody, like in law enforcement or EMS, to anything from what I went through. So I didn't have much to add on that, but I figured I'd bring those up regardless. And then I guess BD will go into your one chart for this fellow. And then we'll wrap it up after that with the thing with Lisa, with kind of going into what really got you into even looking into Lady Bird Lake, which is an older case that we're really not covering, but it's what caught her, I guess, eye on this. So, and then we'll wrap it up with that. All right, so here we go, BD.
Okay, so my very first impression with Matt's chart was not so much the chart, but the knowledge that there's a phenomenon that has been taking place in the Canadian provinces for quite some time. It was called to public attention maybe, I think, 10 or 20 years ago with the case of a young First Nation young man named Neil Stonehouse. And it's a horrible process where if First Nation people were seen leaving a bar or they were walking up the street late at night and just seemed to be hanging around, like in the dead of night or when the bar's closed, police cars would come by and pick them up and give them a lift, except they would drive them way out into a rural area and drop them off, where they would be then found frozen to death within the following days. This procedure, or whatever you want to call it, is starlight tours. That's what they called it. It was so common that the native peoples found and gave a name to it, starlight tours. Oh, Neil Stonehouse was a victim of the starlight tours, and the 2 policemen that took him were prosecuted for it, and they got off. It was a very sad book. I read this book a couple of years ago, and that's what enlightened me about this condition, because I had been listening to podcasts about disappearances of Native and First Nation women in the provinces in Canada. And I found out, oh yeah, it's being done to men too. And it was just horrific. They would find these guys walking around. Sometimes maybe they didn't have a jacket. Maybe they were taking out the garbage. And up there, it's like 20 below. I think a lot of this was in Saskatchewan, which is very rural, very freezing cold. And they were just picking up guys. Oh, we'll take you home, drive them way out to the middle of nowhere, and just drop them off where they freeze to death. So I thought of Matt because I read that he took a very circuitous route to try and get back to his hotel. And therefore the police said, well, he tried to cross the ice on the river and it broke and he fell in. With that in mind, I look at his chart, which is his last scene. And the red circle to the left, being spied upon and stalked, evidence is being misplaced, is being subverted. And the fact that he was injured when he was taken. Of course, he was in that fight, but he was injured by these same people. And also taken by what looks to me very strongly the influence of military or law enforcement. The green and then going across with the black line showing who was the perpetrator and what's his connection. And I've got, Mars, Jupiter strongly relating to law enforcement. And that star at the bottom, I already discussed that he was injured. But immediately looking at that, it occurs to me, oh God, was he a starlight tour type of guy where they just took him somewhere he was done away with and dropped off, where they would make it look like he fell in and drowned. So this chart seems to bear up to that theory. Just replacement of the planets. And also the asteroid here is Hecate, which is envy or destruction, envy or rage. Somebody wanted him done away, specifically him. So, or again, we get Bacchus, which is the drinking and partying, which was the beginning of the evening where he lost his life. And Chiron, he's been injured. He was fingered for this and he was beaten up for this. And the evidence is not being, of course, big surprise, fully disclosed. So I could make a case just looking at this that maybe Matt was a starlight tour. I hate to say it, but it just felt that way to me. Reading of his process from the bar to where he was found, it didn't make any sense. It wasn't the way he would have walked to go to his hotel. Plus, like the starlight tour victims, he didn't have a coat on. It was 20 degrees out. So that's pretty much how I would wrap up this unfortunate case with Matt.
One thing that I find, actually, let me put this back up. One thing I actually find interesting with this, and I don't know if it was because we were just talking about Laurel Canyon and you talk about stars, I think of movie stars. I mean, I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but I mean, you have at some point, it looks like here that Venus, Mercury, is 14 degrees and 27 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have Venus at 27 degrees again. Then you have something else at 27 degrees again. You do have a lot of music in Tour Stars knocked off at 27 as well.
Mm-hmm.
I just found that like really weird. I don't
It
know, maybe
makes
because
you
I'm like
think about the
stoned.
27 Club, too.
Yeah, the 27 clubs and stars,
Yeah.
It's like
Oh, yeah.
and you're talking about
Absolutely.
drinking and partying going on. It sounds like, we're going in that direction now.
Well, there's definitely something to the 27 Club in astrology as well. So,
Yeah, I found that really interesting.
yeah.
Well, thank you, BD. And then I guess we'll be going over to Lisa kind of to wrap this up and to, I guess, give people a little bit of an idea about Lady Bird Lake here.
Yes. So just very quickly, wanted to kind of introduce what we're going to talk about next episode, but as like Nick had mentioned earlier, give an idea of why I even started looking at this to begin with. So this is a quick picture of Ladybird Lake. You can see this is predominantly where most of the bodies are being found. The main thing, just really quickly, it's it's a river in Texas, and then it's sectioned off as a reservoir for Austin. And the majority of the cases that are being found are within Austin proper itself. So the case that I wanted to discuss was Riyad Hamad, and he actually was a Lebanese Muslim, 55 years old. So he kind of typically does not fit the smiley face MO. He's older, not active, not in college or whatever. He's a peace activist, pro-Palestinian. He was a computer teacher at Small Middle School, small as the name small, and then junior middle school. He lived in Austin for 30 years, and he was a pillar of the community. He helped with different aspects of the Muslim community as well as Austin itself, and then also being a teacher. So something interesting happened with Hamad in that in February 27th of 2008, on a Wednesday morning, he's getting ready for work. There's a warrant issued by a judge for the 18 FBI and IRS agents to storm his, I think it was an apartment. It was like a very small apartment, and they raid his apartment and they take like boxes of papers, files, CDs. I think they even said catnip or something like that. And it ended up being that no charges were ever filed on Riyad from this one February incident of 2008. And they were wanting, I guess the warrant itself was issued for wire fraud, bank fraud, or money laundering of sorts. And they were investigating the charity group that I guess he was affiliated with, which was also other Middle Eastern charity groups that were also being investigated by the FBI. And so they look into him. And he was never found guilty. No charges were ever brought against him or anything like that. But somehow, in April of, I believe April 14th, he goes missing, and he doesn't come back home. And I believe his wife is the one that calls him missing. And so they go and look for him the next day. I think they GPS his cell phone or something, and they find that his car is parked. I mean, I even pulled up a map for you guys. His car is parked around Lakeshore Boulevard. Now where the red star is. Now this whole area has now been developed since 2008. So there is no longer a parking lot there, but that's where they pretty much found his car parked. And then it wouldn't be till the next day, Wednesday at 2 p.m., that passerbys that are on the hike bike trail find his body floating where this blue star is. And the thing about it is that they pull him from the water, and there are people viewing this entire situation happening, because this whole lake is surrounded by a hike bike trail. It's constantly populated. There's constantly people running, walking, biking. It's never not populated. So the main thing about this is they pull him from the water, and passerbys or observers basically claim that they see that his entire face is covered in duct tape, and his hands are bound in front of him, and his feet are bound. I think on an autopsy report, they said it was bound with wire. Others said that they saw duct tape bound around his wrists and legs. It was ruled a suicide. And so to me, for some reason, that didn't sit well with me, because it almost was this a signal to the rest, hey, you can get away with disposing of a body in this area, and no one will question because everyone's complicit. I believe the Imam, which is the Muslim person that takes care of the body for burial, basically wanted to file charges or filed a complaint, I know for sure, against the ME at the time that was there, saying that when he received the body, that the body was seeping blood from different incisions that was inadequately sutured. And so it just seems not in line with a suicide, right? That there were spots on his body where flesh was torn open. They had to use all kinds of stuff just to make the body presentable for the burial itself, and that there was facial bruising all over the body. to me, that was the harbinger of like things were going to start to happen here. Now, one of the most interesting things is that this happened in 2008. The year before was the renaming of the reservoir. It used to be called Town Lake, and the locals all call it Town Lake still, but their whole act of defiance. But it was renamed in 2007 to Ladybird Lake, and Ladybird Lake was named after the wife of Lyndon B. Johnson. So that's pretty much what I have for him. Like I said, he's not your typical smiley face killer, but he is included in the list because I think he pretty much, sad to say, kicks it off.
Definitely something shady.
Mm-hmm.
That's for sure, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I recall reading about that case. I mean, the whole fact that he duct taped his hands and his head, like, I don't even know how you would come to a conclusion this is a suicide.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. That's like
one of the things that we'll discuss on the next episode is the actual company that sits close by where they found his car is pretty interesting, that we'll dig into.
Awesome. Yeah, and in part 2, well, we already covered 3. JJ had 6, and Lisa had 6. So, I mean, I think even in part 2, we start getting into, I think because of the timing of them, we start getting into the JJ's and Lisa's in part 2. So that should definitely get a little bit more interesting as well. BD, thank you so much also for coming on and doing what you do. Mm-hmm. I thought those ratings were amazing. That last one really bugged me out with all those 27s as well. Yeah. You know, and that is the path that I think you will cross if you're going up from the moon to the sun, if I'm correct. I think on the Tree of Life. So I even find that interesting as well. You know,
interesting. Well, thanks for having me here.
Of course. JJ, thank you as well for coming on. I really appreciate it. This was solid. It really went a lot smoother than I anticipated, except for my slides not working.
That's a great combo.
Yeah. I thought that was really an amazing job from all of you, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody who jumped in on the chat as well. There was a bunch of people in there. It looked like some new names, maybe people I just don't remember, but definitely saw a lot of great stuff in the chat. You know, there was like even things that JJ had referenced back to that was mentioned in the chat. So I would highly suggest,
good stuff.
Yeah, I'd highly suggest if people don't mind going back to the replay on video, head over to YouTube and you can catch the live chat over there and see some extra stuff. And that is the end of part 1. I'm hoping that we'll do part 2 live. Maybe part 3, I might kind of like leave for everybody to have to wait for, the ending or whatever. I'll see how it is. But I did want to at least do the first 2 parts of the series live with the fans and everything, and just to see how it went. Thank you all again, and that is the end of part 1 in the Occult Rejects Smiley Face Killer Investigation series. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.